All right, everyone. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you do have a Wacom tablet or some sort of drawing tablet, you can attach that and draw in Animate. The biggest thing in Animate is if you attach a tablet to play around with the pressure. Pressure is something that you don't get unless you have like a tablet. Pressure is like how hard you're pressing your stylus against your tablet. If it's very hard, you get a thicker line. If it's lighter, you get a thinner line. Okay. So if you do attach a tablet or Wacom tablet or some sort of drawing tablet other than your mouse to your computer, then you will have that option. It will come up here. If you want to work with a tablet and you don't have one at home, we do have those at Chabot College. You can only use them on campus though. But if you go to any of the, uh, lab rooms, you can ask the assistant to borrow one temporarily and you can use the tablet while you are there. So last video we were talking about drawing. We talked about the classic brush. Now we're going to talk about sort of updated version, which is the fluid brush. It's kind of like the other one too. It does, draw with the fill. The difference being that it has a couple more options here. So you can change the size. Little big brush. So I'm starting with thin lines, thicker lines. Once again, you can use the left, right bracket keys. Okay. Um, Smooth curving, once again, is kind of like, right now, if I draw, I get kind of smoother lines. If I turn this down and I do the same thing, it's a little more rigidy. See how it's not quite as smooth as you see here? You can also do a taper, which means that your lines kind of start thinner and end thinner. So right now it's like this is like a block, but I can use a taper, which means, see how my lines, so they come through a little more, I would call this kind of more painterly. This might be good for like hair or fur or something like that. Pressure, once again, this has to do with your Wacom tablet, so it's how thin or thick the line will be based on how much pressure is being applied. Let's talk about the paint bucket. Paint bucket tool allows you to quickly apply a fill to multiple shapes. So it's going to use whatever your fill color currently is. This is my fill color. So I'm going to click and switch this to yellow. And now when I do this, I'm going to click, 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 click on the fill. And you can see I'm quickly applying a fill to multiple shapes. Okay. Another place where this is helpful is if you, let's say I draw something. I'm going to use the drawing tool. And I'm going to draw you can also use this to fill in a shape too. So the paint bucket not only will change an existing fill, but also add a fill to some place that didn't have a fill. Okay, so if you have a closed shape and you want to add a fill, this is the way you would do that. If you click and hold, there's something called an ink bottle. The ink bottle is kind of the same idea, except it applies it to the stroke instead of the fill. So once again, I'm going to set up my fill. I'm going to set the color, but I'm also going to set a style, maybe like dash lines here. And we'll set a thickness. And then you can see I can click on the edge and apply my stroke. Another reason you might want to use a paint bucket. Let's say your object has a fill but no stroke, which is a possibility. If you highlight, you'll notice you can't actually add a fill this, or sorry, you can't add a stroke this way. So this is the only way you'd be able to add a stroke to your object is by using the ink bottle tool. Okay. Let's talk about resizing a drawing once you've made it in Adobe Animate. So I'm going to highlight, this actually only highlights the fill, like I said. So I'm going to actually double click 1, 2. And I'm going to use this thing called the free transform. This is going to allow me to scale my item. So I get these little boxes on the edges, which I can use, and I can scale it. So I can scale vertically, horizontally. If you want to scale in ratio, I would hold down the Shift key. You can also use the free transform to rotate a tool, rotate an object. So if you put your cursor just a little bit beyond the edges, the four corners, you'll see I'm getting kind of this backwards sort of circle arrow. This allows me to rotate. So if I click and drag, I can rotate my object. Currently, it rotates around your pivot point or your center point. That's the center of your rotation. Okay. The way this works is your object is going to rotate around this. This is in the center. So if I actually click and move this to the corner, it's actually now going to rotate around this. So, now it changes the point of rotation. I click and I drag it here. So if you want, you can, change the point of rotation. The point of rotation will also change where it scales from as well. If you put your cursor in between, you'll notice I get these two little arrows that go like this. This would skew your shape. Okay. You want to be really precise about your scaling or rotation. You can actually, there's a special window for this called transform. And if you go to the transform window, which I just opened here, you can use this to rotate. This is the degree symbol. So if you want to rotate it exactly, I don't know, 17.5 degrees, you can do that. You can skew it an exact ratio. You can also use, this is the percentage. This is how you can scale it. So for instance, let's say I want to blow this up 200% of its normal size. I'm going to set this to 200 for the width and 200 for the height. And that's, my shape is now 200% bigger than its original size. Okay. So if you really want to be like super precise for some reason, this transform panel might be the best way to go for you. All right, let's talk about, so we can add colors. We can also add what's called a gradient. Okay, a gradient in design is a blend between two or more colors. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to highlight this, and this is my fill. And actually what we're going to do is apply what's called a gradient to this. So a fill is a solid color like blue or red. What we're going to do is add a blend between multiple colors. So to do this, we're going to open up what's called the color panel. You can do that by going under window and then going under color. And I get this little panel here. Currently, this is set to solid color, and the solid color is blue. What I'm going to do is click, and we're going to change this to what's called a linear gradient. Okay. A linear gradient means it's a blend between two or more colors that go in a line, like left to right, top to bottom, something like that. First thing we want to do is figure out what colors are going to go into the gradient. Okay, so that's actually the way you set your colors is through here. These are the colors of the gradient. You can see it goes from black to white currently. So my shape is currently the fill is now going from black to white. These are what are called color stops. Color stops are literally the colors in your gradient. Okay. So I'm going to click on this, double click, and you can see it actually opens up the color picker. You can choose a swatch or use the menu here. I'm just going to go from yellow. Oops, except I hit blue, I think. There you go, yellow. And then I'm going to click the other one and switch it to red. Okay, so now my gradient is going from yellow to red, and you can see that my shape is now going from yellow to red. Okay, if you want to, at any point, you can always go back and edit the colors. You can also add colors too, if you want. If you want to have more than two colors in your blend, just click literally right below the line here. And you can see it added an additional color stop. I can then click on it, set it to whatever color you want. And now this is a blend between yellow to blue to red. Okay. If you ever want to remove a color stop, just literally click on it and drag it down, and that would remove it. At the moment, my blend is going from left to right. Let's say I wanted to change the direction of that. The way you would do that is, well, actually, that'll be the next one. This is just applying. So here, this is a linear gradient. We also have what's called a radial gradient. So a linear gradient is a gradient that goes in a line. A radial gradient is a gradient that goes from in to out. Okay. In other words, it blends outward from the center. The way I like to think of it is like when you have a light bulb, the light bulb releases energy or light in all directions. It starts from the center and then the light goes out in all directions. That's kind of what's happening here. Okay. So once again, I'm going to click on this and let's go to the color panel. And it's set to solid, and we're going to set it to a radial gradient. Okay. And actually it's applying that same gradient where, so it's starting from the center now and going outward. So it's yellow to blue to red. So that's yellow to blue to red. I'll admit that does not look great. So maybe let's change that. So I'm going to get rid of this by just literally clicking and dragging it out. And maybe let's go from like a light blue to a dark blue. So I'm going to go, here's a light blue, like an aqua. I'm going to double click this and we'll go to a darker blue, like kind of a royal blue there, maybe like a deeper blue there. There you go. All right. That's my gradient, or that's a linear, or sorry, radial gradient. Okay. By the way, if you want, you can actually also apply a pattern. This is known as a bitmap fill. You click on this, what this will allow you to do is find some sort of pattern and then apply it. All right, so to apply apply a bitmap fill, I'm going to grab this. Inside of the, should be some images there for you. Pattern one, I'm going to hit pattern one. And so you can see that this imports it and it kind of makes this tileable design. I'm going to import some other ones. So this is, you can do this if you'd like. These are various patterns that you can do. So you can also do, in addition to doing a fill and a gradient, you can also do a pattern too. The pattern will only be raster based though. So if you were to blow up your object, it will kind of look distorted after a while. So just be aware of that though. Patterns, unlike say Adobe Illustrator, where you can have vector patterns, you can't have vector patterns in Adobe Animate. Okay, just be aware of that. All right, let's talk about editing a gradient once you've applied it. So I have these two objects here. Click. I'm going to go to the free transform tool. I'm going to go to where it's click and hold to get what's called the gradient transform. This is going to allow you to, this is for linear gradients. If it's a linear gradient, you're going to get this line here, and that actually allows you to make the gradient taller or shorter. You can use this to place it around your item if you want to move the gradient on your item. And then there's going to be a little circle in the corner here, and that allows you to rotate the gradient. Okay. So you can choose where you want the gradient to be, how tall you want the gradient to be, and then what direction you want it to be. If it is a radial gradient and you click on it with the gradient transform tool, you're going to get this. This is the center of where it starts to blend. This makes it more or less oval. If it's more of an oval, this will be more probably useful where you can actually rotate it. If your object is more circular, you probably won't really notice much of a difference. And then this is to make it bigger or smaller. So the arrow makes it bigger or smaller, or the arrow that goes kind of, it's kind of hard to tell, but the arrow in a circle makes it bigger. The arrow in a box makes it more or less oval or rectangle. And then the circle with the triangle in the corner will rotate it. Okay. So try that out. That was the fluid brush, paint bucket, transform, gradient, and then gradient transform button.